Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit. Welcome to CBS News 24/7. We're watching a lot of stories today, but the big ones that are happening in our nation's capital. Get this. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is back on Capitol Hill. We are following his high-stake meetings with lawmakers that are happening throughout the morning. And his visit comes as President Trump is doubling down on his proposal to take over Gaza, while White House aides are walking back parts of his plan. We told you this was going to happen. What the administration is now saying about what the president intends to do. The president will also meet with congressional Republicans today on budget resolutions before signing additional executive orders later this afternoon. This morning, the president attended 2 national prayer breakfasts. He told lawmakers he wants religion to be a foundation of the U.S. again.
From the earliest days of our republic, faith in God has always been the ultimate source of the strength that beats in the hearts of our nation. We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time.
The president has just finished speaking at the second prayer breakfast right now. Our Nancy Cordes is there. We're going to check in with her a little bit later. But meanwhile, let's talk about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is, as we say, headed to Capitol Hill this morning to meet with the GOP leadership. Now, yesterday, the top Republican in the House defended the president's proposal. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is live on Capitol Hill and joins me now to discuss. So, Nicole, Speaker Johnson's remarks came less than 24 hours before his meeting with Netanyahu. What are we expecting from that conversation today?
Well, I think by and large, this is an opportunity. Obviously, the speaker has expressed close solidarity with Israel and the Israeli people, particularly in light of October 7th. So this is just an opportunity to kind of reaffirm that support. But also, look, this comes amid the backdrop of President Trump just this week laying out a pretty provocative proposal to have the U.S. take over Gaza in light of the war between Israel and Gaza. And certainly that's gotten a lot of pushback, not only in the Arab world, but even here on Capitol Hill among some of the president's allies. Now, by and large, Speaker Johnson has expressed some support, measured support for the idea, saying that it was bold and decisive. But he also said that further discussion is required to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. I pressed the speaker, though, more specifically about whether he does agree with the president's position. Take a listen. I know you said what the president said yesterday was bold and decisive, but yes or no, do you believe the U.S. should take control of Gaza? And is that a position you're going to reaffirm with the prime minister when he's here at the Capitol tomorrow?
Well, I look forward to meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. There's a lot to discuss. I've been a very close ally of his, and to be frank, for the last 4 years, I think I was probably the highest ranked member of the federal government who was unequivocally supporting Israel and the prime minister. So we'll have that discussion.
So again, as you heard the speaker there say, he didn't exactly say yes or no in terms of whether or not he agrees with the president's stance, but he has said at several opportunities, again, that he thinks it's a good development, but one that merits further discussion. He also talked about understanding the need to rebuild Gaza. And so he feels that's kind of where the president was coming from. But in talking to other congressional Republicans, they are certainly concerned about, the prospect of trying to put boots on the ground in Gaza, which is something the White House has pushed back against. But still, there are just a lot of questions about how that type of proposal would work. And so some Senate Republicans, for instance, told me that they believe the president's idea is just simply a non-starter.
Okay, Nicole, as you know, on the other side of the aisle, some Democrats literally stayed up all night in protest of the president's nominee for White House budget director. Explain what's going on there.
Yeah, well, look, obviously there's been a lot of concern, particularly among congressional Democrats, in terms of what they believe is upheaval with respect to the federal government and the federal workforce, whether it was the confusion last week about the funding freeze. And even still, the congressional Democrats have expressed some concerns that some agencies are still, or entities are still being blocked from getting funding. And then you look at the closure of some agencies, for instance, USAID. You look at other instances where, Elon Musk and members of his Doge team have, reportedly gained access to some sensitive payment systems. All of this is of grave concern to a number of congressional Democrats. And so they are particularly concerned about the nomination of Russell Vought, who is the president's pick to lead the Office of Management and Budget, which kind of handles a lot of these efforts and decisions. So they are protesting by basically holding the floor during this period ahead of that final confirmation vote. Now, it is likely that Vought will have the votes to be confirmed, but this is a way that Democrats are hoping they can protest his nomination or at least try to slow it down.
All right, Nicole Killian for us on Capitol Hill. Nicole, thank you very much. I want to bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who's at the Washington Hilton, where the second prayer breakfast President Trump attended is taking place. And Nancy joins us now. Nancy, no word yet, I guess, if the president intends to replace 2 Corinthians with his favorite Bible passage, 2 Corinthians. But tell me what's going on there today at the president's prayer breakfast.
Well, the president talked a lot about religious freedom and religious liberty, Vlad. He said that he wants to be the president to bring religious liberty back and bring it back very strongly. He outlined some steps that he wants to take to do that. For example, he said in his speech here at the Washington Hilton that he is going to create a new presidential commission on religious liberty. He said it's going to be a very big deal. He said he's going to be signing an executive order later today directing his new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to create a task force to immediately eradicate all forms of anti-Christian bias in the U.S. And then finally, he said he's going to be creating an Office of White House Faith, White House Faith Office, rather. He insisted that religious freedom has been under attack, under assault over the last few years. He argued that the Biden administration was against religious freedom, and he didn't give many examples of that. He did point to a woman who was here at this prayer breakfast this morning who had been sentenced to 2 years in prison after she protested outside of a D.C. abortion clinic. The president pardoned her recently. He said that she was simply exercising her First Amendment rights, her religious liberty. Prosecutors said that she and her fellow protesters were physically blocking patients from getting into the office. Nevertheless, here before this gathering for the prayer breakfast, President Trump said he wants to put religious freedom front and center in his administration.
Okay, we'll see what happens there, Nancy. Let me ask you about this federal judge who's blocked the president's executive order that aims at ending birthright citizenship. This was a major campaign promise of the president. What is the White House now saying about it?
Well, they are likely to appeal this second decision by a federal judge to at least temporarily block the president's new executive order. She said that it would be unconstitutional to fulfill this executive order, that no court in 125 years has ever agreed with the analysis of the Trump administration about birthright citizenship. What Trump wants to do is basically prevent anyone who is born to someone who is here in the country illegally or here in the country legally but temporarily from being able to claim birthright citizenship. For now, though, that's on ice. That is blocked as this case winds through the courts and potentially heads eventually to the Supreme Court, Vlad.
All right, and finally, Nancy, in a post on his Truth Social account this morning, the president says Gaza would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. This is not an off-the-cuff remark the president has made. This is something that he is signaling, which will be a major policy stance of the United States government. So what is the White House's plan for Gaza at this moment?
I would say it's still quite confusing, Vlad. What the president said in that post last night was that that somehow the Israelis would hand Gaza over to the United States after the fighting has ended and after after Israel has somehow managed to relocate the 2 million people who live in Gaza right now, put them somewhere else in beautiful housing, as the president put it. And so it would basically be handed over to the United States empty. And that is why, he argues, the U.S. would not need to commit any U.S. troops to the operation, because there would be no one there to fight the U.S. occupation. He has also insisted this wouldn't cost the U.S. any money, even as he says that the U.S. would be developing it into a world-class destination, and he has also said that we would own it in perpetuity. How that would cost no money, require no U.S. troops, remains to be seen. We have asked the White House about this. They have sometimes given different explanations than the president himself has. They have said it's only going to be temporary, that people would eventually be allowed to come back. And as we know, Vlad, the reaction from overseas, from Middle Eastern countries, has been that all of this would be against international law to displace millions of Palestinians.
And Nancy, really quickly, I know you and the White House press corps are very familiar with Trumpese, but I get that sometimes the president will inject some humor in the things that he's saying. But what is the reference to Chuck Schumer, who happens to be a Jewish American, with reference to Gazans being resettled? I'm failing to understand the connection.
You're talking about in his Truth Social post last night?
Yeah.
Well, it's true that Chuck Schumer is Jewish. However, Schumer is also against this idea that somehow the Israelis have full rights to the Gaza Strip, and they simply have the power to hand it over to the United States. However, Vlad, I can tell you that at the White House, and conservatives in this country and conservative leaders in Israel have long believed that the Israelis should lay claim to more territory, either in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. And so what the president is saying, even though it's a bit confusing, off the cuff, even though it seems a little bit half-baked, it does reflect what some conservatives in this country and what some right-wing leaders in Israel have been saying for quite some time. And that's why it's being received very positively from these right-wing leaders in Israel, even as you hear condemnation from other nations in the Middle East.
Important context there, as always, from Nancy Cordes. Nancy, thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. All right, switching gears now. Many people are waking up to snow this morning. More than 95 million people are under a winter storm threat. A dangerous storm is causing a triple threat of snow, sleet, and ice across the Northeast as far as New England. CBS News senior national weather correspondent Rob Marciano is live from Hillsdale, New Jersey. Still looking pretty snowy where you are, Rob. Although I got to say, we were expecting something crazy here in New York City, and it's not that bad.
Well, that's why I'm here, Vlad, because I knew it wouldn't be crazy. Now I'm kidding. All it takes is a degree or two, really. And matter of fact, the temperature here is marginal. And one of the ways we measure in the field how cold it is how long it takes a hot cup of coffee from the bagel place across the street to get to room temperature and below. And it took a little bit longer in the past hour. I got to admit to you. So it's still not bad, although not fantastic. The other way we look at things, and see my camera op's not going to be happy with me getting this close. Our equipment's protected by a gazebo. And every once in a while, you'll see these drops of kind of rain coming down. That's the snow beginning to melt. So we can say with confidence that our temperature right now is finally above the freezing mark. So an inch of icy, the sleet and snow has been the accumulation here this morning in Hillsdale, which is about 15 to 20 miles as a crow flies from New York City, north and west, which is typically where you'd get a little bit more accumulation in the New York metro area. But you can see that the roads now are getting a little bit better. They weren't so good an hour or two ago. It was really dicing the secondary roadways here. And we're right by the train station, so if you hear choo-choo, you know that's the New Jersey Transit commuter rail. That's flowing just fine. But there are a lot of school districts, including my kids, that are not going to school today. So they're taking advantage of this. It's a snow day. That's not really a snow day, so the kids can't get out and sled and do snow angels like that. But nonetheless, it's really a mess out here. We will continue to warm up, and some of this, at least, will continue to melt through the day, Vlad.
All right, Rob. Thank you very much, my brother. Appreciate it. Still ahead, thousands of children in Sudan are starving amid a civil war and a hunger crisis that many fear President Trump's aid freeze could worsen. We're going to have a rare look inside the war-torn country next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, we're showing you pictures now of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Capitol Hill. He is set to meet with some GOP lawmakers later this morning. Obviously, we're keeping an eye out on those developments, given the news that the President of the United States has made this week with his plans, the plans for the United States as it relates to Gaza. And now we're learning that Hamas has responded to the President's plans for the United States to take control of the Gaza Strip. The group says it categorically rejects the idea, as you might imagine. Now it's called on all Palestinians to unite in opposition that has raised concerns that already the fragile ceasefire deal could be on even thinner ice. CBS News national correspondent Ian Lee, who has spent multiple years covering the Middle East, is here in the Studio 55 to talk to me about this. It's good to see you here in New York. Ian, as we've pointed out, you've spent many, many years covering the Middle East, going back to your time even before here at CBS. Just let me get your sense of the reaction of what people in the Palestinian territories might be saying in reaction to what the president is suggesting.
I think there's probably a lot of shock, Vlad. People hearing what the president said. We haven't heard this from the U.S. government before, some proposal like this. So there's a lot of shock in the West Bank and in Gaza, but also of digging in their heels. These are people who are, many of them, descendants of families that fled in 1948 and 1967, their homes. They don't want to make 2025 another year in that list. So there's going to be a lot of resistance to the president's plan.
The president has suggested that countries like Egypt and Jordan could take in the 2 million residents of the Gaza Strip. Both of those countries have signaled that that's impossible, not just because it would present a huge economic burden and strain on their treasuries, but also they wouldn't be able to know whether or not some of the people that were coming in were perhaps potential terrorists.
I've lived in Egypt, I've lived in Jordan, I've been to those borders many times, and I can tell you Egypt actually built the wall and its border fortifications during the war. It doesn't want Gazans on the Sinai Peninsula. Jordan doesn't. They can't handle it. They don't want them. This really does seem, though, like a non-starter. I would be surprised if the White House and Israeli officials are really considering this. It seems a bit shocking to most people, this kind of proposal, but it seems more to me like a negotiating tactic by the Trump administration, knock regional leaders off balance for future negotiations when it comes to the Palestinians and the Israelis. I would be very surprised if anyone in Israel or the White House is really taking this consideration seriously.
I would tend to agree with you, Ian, except that, you've heard Nancy Cordes in our segment earlier suggesting that there are some right-wing Israeli politicians who are in support of this. We know that some of the right-wingers in Israel have long supported the state of Israel annexing the entire Gaza Strip, including even the West Bank. We know that treaties would fall apart. Treaties that exist between Israel and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, those would go by the wayside. So on one hand, I want to be optimistic like you and think to myself, like, this is just a bluff, this is just a tactic. On the other, if there are people who have had this wish for quite some time, and now you've got the backing of the superpower, the United States, why wouldn't you do it?
You're absolutely right. There is a section of Israeli society on the right that would like to see the Gazans leave the Gaza Strip, settlers move in, and they are a very vocal and strong part of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition. He needs them to stay in power, and that's very important for him right now, especially as he has legal issues. But by and large, if you look at Gaza, it's approximately 1.8 million people. They won't leave, so you'd have to do that by force. Many legal scholars say that if you did that, that would be ethnic cleansing, and it's just really a non-starter. And there are large vocal parts of Israeli society that doesn't want that to happen too. So it does seem like it would be very difficult.
And I just keep thinking to myself that part of the rise of Osama bin Laden and that whole jihadist movement that happened in the late 80s up until 9/11 came about because they felt that Americans were intruding, having boots on the ground in places that they thought were sacred, where Americans should not be. So even though the president is suggesting there won't be American boots on the ground, as you say, it'd be very hard to do without using force.
Absolutely.
All right, Ian Lee, so great to have you here for this context, man. Probably the best conversation I've had this week here in the studio. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for being here. All right, folks, let's talk about what's happening in East Africa now. Millions of people in Sudan are grappling with starvation after a nearly 2-year brutal civil war. And that's why our Deborah Patta traveled recently to Sudan, where aid organizations are warning that President Trump's 90-day suspension of U.S. foreign aid is threatening to turn the situation in the country into an all-out catastrophe.
The time to roll back funding is not now. It's the time to step up funding.
You don't have 90 days.
And every single delay means lives are lost. We are extremely worried it's going to be too late, and we're going to be digging up bodies instead of feeding them.
Deborah Patta joins us now from Johannesburg for more on her time in Sudan. Deborah, I'm sorry we didn't actually play your package, which was so illuminating about what is happening in Sudan. But just tell us what you discovered when you and your crew traveled some 14 hours and more into the heart of the country to report on what you were seeing.
It was a long journey, Vlad, 2 years nearly to get in. Once inside, we were still drowning in paperwork. As you said, sometimes driving 12 to 14 hours a day because we had to go through dozens and dozens of checkpoints. We printed over 100 copies of our visas and permits and passports, which you hand out each time, and that still wasn't enough. It's an idea of the kind of tiresome bureaucracy that aid organizations also have to go through. And what we saw when we got there, when we got to areas near the front line, was nothing short of devastating. Half the population, that's around 25 million people, are starving, 3.2 million children. They arrive every day with their families at displacement camps after fleeing the violence. And every child that we saw that had just arrived under the age of 3 was severely malnourished, Vlad, which means that they will die without intervention. They have no immunity, so they cannot fight infection, diarrhea, cholera, malaria. And we couldn't even get to the worst hit areas like Zamzam camp in Darfur, which has had one aid convoy in the last 10 months. And even in the camps that we could get to, food was still an issue. Its delivery often bogged down by this debilitating bureaucracy. Food has been weaponized there. Take a look at this camp that we went to in Kassala. We're in a displacement camp in Kassala in Sudan, where people have fled war and violence that has been raging for nearly 2 years in this country. Now, one of the biggest problems of this war is food. There is hunger, there is starvation. This camp, which is in a safe area, has not had food for nearly 2 months. So people here are desperate. They are queuing, determined to get their basket, which has to last them for at least a month. If they are lucky, it could actually be longer. And make no mistake, in some areas where famine has been declared in this country, it is a man-made famine. It is a result of war. Farming has been disrupted, and in some areas, humanitarian access has not been allowed or is simply too dangerous for people to reach, which means that what we're seeing here are people who've managed to escape.
Deborah, I love highlighting your reporting, and every opportunity that I get to do that, I support it because it's so important for Americans to understand what is happening in parts of the world that they're not that familiar with. But for just a moment, let me play devil's advocate and say what sometimes people will say to me in messages after they see a report from you in Africa about a situation like this, which is you reference the fighting, you reference the warlords, you reference the brutal civil war that has been taking place there for over 2 years. And people will say, look, we want to help, but what are the leaders of these countries, specifically now in Sudan, doing to alleviate the suffering of their people other than fighting over territory? Can you explain that to someone who might not understand how vital our aid is to making sure that children don't die by the millions?
Well, there is no elected leader in Sudan. They have been at war for nearly 2 years because rival warlords are fighting for power. Now, cast your mind back to 2019 when there was a people's revolution that overthrew the former Sudanese dictator, Omar al-Bashir. And everyone thought this was the dawning of a new era in that country. But in fact, what happened was 2 generals joined forces and stole power in a coup from the people of Sudan. They were supposed to hand it over back to them After 2 years, it never happened. And then it devolved. They had a falling out, and they have plunged their country into war. It is a brutal, brutal civil conflict. Remember, Vlad, people get trapped behind the fighting lines through no fault of their own. They have zero access to food. So for them to get food, they first have to flee the violence and then get the food that is provided often by America, who is the biggest donor in that region. And now with the shutting down of aid, it could be catastrophic. The U.S. provided $2.3 billion in aid to Sudan last year. And that looks like it's going to be completely taken away, because it's not just aid. It's food that gets loaded onto a truck. It's the truck drivers. It's the people who pay the truck drivers. People have been locked out of their phones, their computers. They have no access to them, so they can't pay them anymore. So this entire system is now unraveling, and the people of Sudan are being sacrificed. 25 million people are starving.
Such important context, Deborah. Specifically, as you say, these are people that are trapped with forces beyond their control. They have nothing, and now have even less, given the policies that are about to be implemented here in the United States. Deborah Pata for us, reporting from the continent of Africa, as always, illuminating and important reporting. Deborah, we appreciate it. All right, coming up next, we're going to go to Dearborn, Michigan. It is the largest Arab-American community in the United States. And believe it or not, President Trump won it in the November election. But his stunning Middle East proposal, as you can imagine, is frustrating some residents who voted for him. We're going to have a little bit more on their reaction coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. President Trump's plan to take over Gaza is causing mixed emotions, you might say, for some of the Arab Americans who voted for him. Now, some of those voters are in Dearborn, Michigan, which has the largest Arab American population in the United States. In 2024, they flipped to President Trump, partly to protest President Biden's handling of the crisis in Gaza. CBS News national correspondent Nikki Batiste is in Dearborn, Michigan. I recall, Nikki, prior to the election, that folks were calling President Joe Biden Genocide Joe. That was the terminology that was used about President Biden in the way that he was supporting the state of Israel in their attempts to root out terror on the Gaza Strip. And that's why many people felt that he wasn't the right man to be president of the United States, and so they voted for Trump. How are they reacting now to the fact that the president of the United States is suggesting that 2 million residents in Gaza be somehow removed from their land and the area turned into resorts?
Vlad, you made a really good point. It's a point a lot of people here, even those who voted for Trump, want to make. We didn't vote necessarily for Trump. We voted against Biden. The reaction here is mostly outrage, some mixed emotion. I spoke with the publisher of the Arab American newspaper here, Osama Simblani. I asked him, what is your reaction to these remarks from Trump? He didn't vote at all, but take a look at what he said.
Outraged. I could not believe that the president of the United States is uttering these words. Even Trump, I did not think that he would go this far, breaking international law and disregard to our own laws. We do not regard Gaza as a land that's for grab. It's a Palestinian land. I was very shocked and surprised.
He made a point to tell me he didn't vote at all for any presidential candidate. He usually does because he just didn't prefer either. I spoke with a young woman, a college senior who voted in her first presidential election. She did vote for Trump. She said when she saw his remarks on Gaza, she gasped and was initially shocked, but ultimately not surprised. And I said, do you regret in any way voting for him? And she said, maybe, but if I hadn't and Kamala Harris had won, maybe we wouldn't still have a ceasefire. Gives you some sense of the feeling here, Vlad.
Really quickly before you go, what do they plan on doing about it? I mean, are they going to campaign against candidates who the president is supporting in the midterm elections and possibly in the next presidential election?
I think many of them haven't thought that far. There were some protesters in the Capitol here in Michigan, but there definitely has been strong feelings. The Arab American Arab Americans for Trump organization, not affiliated with the Trump campaign, but did a lot of outreach for him, actually changed their name yesterday to Arab Americans for Peace. So that gives you an idea of what the feeling is here and what we might see going forward.
Well, I guess I'm sure the president of the United States will be really worried about that. Okay, Nikki Batiste, thank you very much with a really important report from Dearborn, Michigan. Nikki, thank you. All right, President Trump's plan to take over Gaza has received backlash also from regional partners in the Middle East, and this comes as mediators try to negotiate the second phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay, I believe, has more from Tel Aviv.
Well, remember, 79 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. Under the ongoing ceasefire, several are being sent home each weekend. We sat down with the brother and sister of Keith Siegel, an American Israeli from North Carolina who was released just a few days ago.
People are ecstatic. There's so much joy and happiness and so much ability to exhale with joy.
So it's as if you've been holding your breath.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
For 15, 16 months.
I think it was, he was going to live, and he was going to do and did do everything that it takes within your body and soul to keep going. And he said that he told us that he talked to himself, having conversations with us and thinking about things that he wanted to do when he'd be back home. And he just didn't allow himself to go to a sad place. It's extraordinary.
It's torture. For us, the torture continues. We are so happy beyond words that Keith is home, but we know what it is to wait for the list and who's going to be on the list. And will the hostages really on Saturday be on their way back? I couldn't believe that Keith was on his way back. We protect ourselves until we can hug. We don't let our guard down.
It's indeed a fragile situation. An Israeli expert we spoke to wonders if Trump's plan to resettle Gazans outside the Strip is a negotiation tactic to get more leverage over Hamas, but admits it makes the ceasefire even more unpredictable. Back to you.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. A state of emergency has been declared on Santorini after a string of earthquakes measuring 4.0 magnitude rocked the Greek island. Santorini has been hit with a series of tremors over the past few days, forcing the more than 11,000 people to evacuate. At this point, no major damage has been reported. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with a look at the national forecast. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Vlad, good morning. Yeah, we've been dealing with this icy mess across the Northeast. We've been dealing with it all morning here in Philadelphia, and now we're seeing some of that start to move up into New England. You can see the cold is entrenched here up across New England, and we are still seeing the snow, the rain, the freezing rain, and of course that icing threat. Here's a look at current national radar. And again, you can see where this is now. The snow, where you see the blue, the white color kind of lifting up into Maine. Another round of heavy snow for the White Mountains and the Adirondacks. But again, dangerous icing across portions of West Virginia, Maryland, and western Pennsylvania this morning. That is shifting to the north and east, but we have a very similar looking storm system headed into the same areas for the weekend on Saturday night, especially. We'll take a look at that coming up. Let's talk about what to expect for the rest of the day. Again, we are seeing temperatures basically not much better than freezing as we go into the afternoon, and I am disappearing here. So we're going to walk over this way and talk about, again, what we're seeing for the rest of the day. We're seeing temperatures across the country basically looking a little on the cold side, especially across the northern plains. This next system is going to feed off of that and bring another round of dangerous icing to the northeast. And we still have the atmospheric river in the west with more rain and snow coming up. I'll take you through it. We'll get the monitors back for you, and we'll walk through what to expect heading into the weekend. Vlad, back over to you.
All right, looking forward to that, Kate. Thank you very much. We are just 3 days away from Super Bowl 59, the matchup between the Eagles and the Chiefs. We're going to go to New Orleans and check on the prep and the atmosphere as the city gears up for the big game. Happening now, breaking into our newsroom just moments ago, the Senate Judiciary Committee has apparently delayed its vote to advance the president's pick for FBI director. The man you're seeing on your screen right now, Kash Patel. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is on the story on Capitol Hill. So, Nicole, what happened?
Well, right now, Senate Democrats are holding a press conference, but prior to this delay, during this business meeting that the Senate Judiciary Committee had to consider the nomination of Kash Patel, they expressed a lot of concerns about some of his past statements and positions with respect to January 6th, with regard to some of his online posts suggesting violence against elected officials. And so that merited some concern on the part of Democrats. And so consequently, we are now seeing this vote put on hold. Unclear exactly when it will pick up, but certainly there was some protest among Democrats to take a little bit more time with this nomination. So as of now, Chuck Grassley, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, just gavelled out of session. And so again, we will update you when we know what those next steps may be.
All right, Nicole, we'll check in with you when you have some new information. We appreciate it, as always, running to a camera position for us. All right, now to a CBS News exclusive. Our team has been investigating the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in Illinois. Since the death of Sonia Massey last summer, CBS News national correspondent and anchor of the Weekend News, Jerika Duncan, has details about what we uncovered.
I'm trying to get help, y'all.
Last July, Sonia Massey called 911, concerned about a possible prowler outside her Illinois home. Less than 5 minutes after entering, Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson shot Massey dead in her kitchen. Grayson later said he felt threatened. He's been charged with murder and pleaded not guilty. The sheriff at the time characterized the shooting as an isolated incident.
This was a rogue individual that acted outside the scope of his authority.
But a CBS News investigation revealed there was nothing isolated about the shooting of Sonia Massey. We found a pattern in Sangamon County, dozens of allegations of misconduct against the sheriff's office over the past 20 years, including 8 deaths in addition to Massey's.
This is our son that we lost that we'll never have.
In 2021, Cindy Cody's stepson, Jamison Cody, was arrested for aggravated domestic battery. That night in jail, correction officers wanted to move him to a different room. He resisted. Shay Kelly is the family's attorney.
They took him down to the ground, and a man of over 300 pounds sat on his back, broke ribs.
Cody was pronounced dead the next day.
He died from positional asphyxia, homicide. It was a homicide.
We brought together families who say they've been victimized by the sheriff's office and have sued.
This just goes on and on. Somebody has to stop it.
None of the officers involved has been criminally charged, and in each case, the sheriff's office and the officers denied any wrongdoing, even in the cases the county settled.
I can't move on until there's some kind of justice.
Starla Smith's 23-year-old son, Dylan Schleeper Clark, died from what she says was a treatable staph infection after her son was booked at a county jail for drug possession in 2022.
The doctors told you he could have survived had he been treated sooner.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think deputies saw when they looked at your child?
I don't think they looked at him. I think that they looked past him.
We showed 50 abuse complaints to Sangamon County's new sheriff, Paula Crouch, appointed in the wake of Massey's death.
Does this office have a policing problem?
I don't think that the sheriff's office has a policing problem. Do you run into bad employees? Probably every agency has had those people.
What I'm hearing is there's no limit to how many complaints someone could have and very well still be working as a deputy.
There's no written limit that says after 5 complaints, you're fired.
Sonia Massey's cousin, Sante, says he's still traumatized by what happened.
I would say to the new sheriff, be a rebel. There's nowhere to go from here but up.
Advice for the future, grounded in a painful past. For Eye on America, I'm Jerika Duncan in Springfield, Illinois.
I'm going to have much more news ahead. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Kansas City Chiefs take on the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59 this Sunday, and law enforcement in New Orleans is ramping up security. President Trump will attend the game. CBS News national correspondent Katie Weiss is in New Orleans, and she joins me now to talk about it. So, Katie, over a month ago, you were covering the deadly terror attack in New Orleans on New Year's Day. What changes have you seen in the city and in the security leading up to the Super Bowl?
Well, you're right, Vlad. The city has truly gone through a lot over the last month. They've survived a deadly terror attack that was an historic event here, and then another historic event that also rocked the city and even caused a boil water notice for many people right here in downtown was a blizzard that we saw here, a freak blizzard that we haven't seen ever in the history of recorded weather in the city. So certainly something now with the Super Bowl coming, a welcome reprieve. But because of those events, we've also seen the city take extra measures to make sure that folks are safe here.
So, Katie, the big game is just a few days away. What's the vibe?
Well, the vibe is great. As I mentioned, it's a welcome reprieve to have this big event here coming this weekend. It's buzzing. I mean, here in the media room where we currently are, we've been seeing all sorts of, famous athletes, now retired, celebrities walking by. In fact, Cousin Sal from Jimmy Kimmel just came over and asked me to help him with his makeup. You never know what you're going to run into here in the media center, but even out in the Big Easy, we've been talking with folks who have been just truly enjoying what New Orleans has to offer, that place where you don't feel like you have to worry about anything. You can just come here and have fun. And all of the security measures that we've seen that have been so incredibly heightened over the last few weeks, and especially this week now with helicopters and drones that have increased around the city, people are really feeling like they can feel free to have that good time. They can feel safe and not worry about anything else but a good time.
And last question, Katie, of course, because hard-hitting journalism is the center of what is happening there. Is Travis Kelce going to propose to Taylor Swift? America wants to know. Deliver that hard-hitting reporting for us.
Oh, boy, if I had a magic 8-ball, I would tell you, Vlad. I wish that I knew. But maybe we could go talk to one of those future fortune tellers over in Jackson Square, and then I'll have an answer for you later today. How about that?
I mean, that's literally the only thing I'm thinking about. I want to see a big old proposal in the middle of the field after the game. Katie, who do you like for the game? Who do you like? Who do you think is going to win?
Well, I gotta say, I'm always rooting for an underdog. You can't help but love that. So I think I'm gonna have to say I'll go for the Eagles.
Okay, you heard it here first, America. Katie Weiss with the prediction. Katie, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring in the CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with the last look at the national forecast. So you heard it there, Kate. Philly's in contention.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to ask me who I'm picking? Because that's a dead giveaway, right? Philadelphia, we're going to do it. We're going to take them down this time.
People know that you live in Philly.
It's Saquon Barkley's birthday, right? I mean, he's going to do it on his birthday. I don't care about Travis and Taylor. We're going to get it done for Saquon on his birthday. Very excited already about this. All right, let's talk about the forecast here. We have some messy weather here in Philadelphia today. It is getting better, though. This system has been bringing ice, freezing rain, sleet, and also snow, another round of snow for the mountains of New England. But as we go through the next couple of hours, this is going to get out of here, and we've got high pressure building in for just one day before another similar system takes hold of the region on Saturday. Still winter weather advisories and still an ice storm warning for portions of central Pennsylvania and into portions of West Virginia. Looking at another 6+ inches of snow in New England as we go through the rest of today and into tonight. Vlad, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Kate Bilo for us with another prediction for Philly. Thank you, Kate. That does it for me, folks, but stay right where you are after the break. Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS.